stranded, and all of them out of line. When all the dreams had been branded, long beyond their time. When everyone had been told to follow kind with kind. That's when we knew that the seers, all of them were blind. This time they told us was different. This time we finally change. This time we'd learn all that we meant. This time we'd reach the range. But when the time came down to it, we found something strange. All those from the new order seem permanently deranged. All things we've seen, those colors from blue to green, all changes to move ahead, all bring us right back instead to so everything is brand new now. Change has finally come. Now that we've finally seen how to reach everyone. Now that we finally learned how the tale that we have spun. I wonder when we'll all realize this plot's already been done. This time they told us was different. And this time we'd finally change. This time we'd learn all that we meant. And this time we reached the range. But when the time came down to it, we found something strange. All those from the new order seem permanently deranged. All things we've seen, those colors from blue to green, all changes to move ahead, all bring us right back instead to
something just a little bit different. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Arvanauts, and welcome, everyone, to a very special Thursday night stream as we continue our menu of offerings that we deliver live to the Twitch community that is broadening us beyond just games and tabletop games, though, of course, we love those things dearly, but also to what is more principally or directly my job, and that has to do with my life as a writer. And as you can see in that amazing graphic that we have on the screen, that is because we have the amazing Cat Rambo, who I will introduce to you all in just a moment. The Rambo Academy for Wayward Writers returns with class number 2, this one on creating engaging characters. I cannot wait. But before we get to there, we're going to have to wait a little bit longer because I'm going to have to talk a little bit about just a couple things on the channel. First of all, if you haven't done so already, please follow the channel. That is always much appreciated. Please make sure to check out the YouTube channel with the !ArvTube, where you can see the past broadcast of this class and many other shows on this channel. !ArvChord will let you get over to my Discord channel where you can hang out with us in between streams. Exclamation point ArvTreon is the, Arv Twitter. Let me do that first. Exclamation point Arv Tweets will let you get over to my Twitter, where you can follow me over there, and exclamation point Tweet will let you retweet the stream to all and sundry. That is always appreciated, and please do that. Those of you who have already done so, thanks. If you haven't, please consider doing that, because we like to broaden out beyond just the Twitch community and get more people into this pleasant little family that we've got. And then, of course, we've got the website where you can find all of this, arvineleron.com, the details for that. That leads us to the financial ways to support the channel. One of those is exclamation point ArvTreon. That is the Patreon that is currently sitting at $333.96. We want to see that get up to $350 if we can, because that $350 amount is, something we'll be able to set as a new milestone. We'll have some other things that will become available to the channel, and you individually can get cool stuff for yourself, including epic character backgrounds and poems and things like that written about you. And then that's the Patreon. Exclamation point Arv Shop is the merchandise area. We are currently working, Kilobyte is feverishly working, one might say, on getting the new merchandise up for the Adventures of Middle-earth crew, which is going to be going up there, which is going to be awesome. That will go along with our Infinite and Beyond stuff, and we will be adding Esper Genesis stuff there eventually as well, and maybe even some other things relating to new stuff on the channel, which I'll talk about in just a second. And then last but certainly not least, that sub button. We are sitting at 47 subs as we speak. Would love to see that get back up to 50 and beyond it. We have been sort of floating right around the 50 sub mark for a week or so, which is our new sort of floor, and I'm glad, because that's a higher floor than we used to have. But again, if you were able to sub to the channel, that is always appreciated. We can get some cool stuff for us, and some cool stuff for you as well. You can use those awesome emotes and things like that. What's up, Fury Fire? Yes, exactly, right, everything. The last thing I want to mention here is just a couple of notes about schedule. So tonight we have got, again, the class from Cat Rambo's Academy for Wayward Writers. Of course, she does this herself through Google Hangouts and other things that she does. But this is the second class on Twitch specifically, with live broadcast to all of you lovely people. And so you're going to have the opportunity to watch this class and then ask questions of Cat at the end of it. This will be the last time when you can do so freely. After this, you'll be able to watch the class, but you won't be able to ask questions in the class unless you are a sub at a certain level or a Patreon supporter at a certain level. And so this is something that we're doing to try to increase, sort of increase your value, let us say, for the subs. So think of this as like a 2-month trial period. And I think it was well worth it if you were here for Cat's world building class last month. So you'll have a chance to do that. Tomorrow will be Esper Genesis, in which Cat will be again involved. And then on Saturday, we have got the conclusion of the Sorcery Game Book 2, City Port of Traps, which has been really, really awesome, speaking of good writing. And then we'll be moving on to Deus Ex Human Revolution, which will be a brand new game, so we will see. The first hit is free, exactly. Consider this your gateway drug to better writing. That will be what we'll be doing next. And then next week, we will have a very eventful set of streams. I'll be going to Origins towards the latter part of the week. I'll be doing a live broadcast of Esper Genesis, a live broadcast of Infinity and Beyond. We're going to try to do a live broadcast of Emberwind as well, and there will be a Thursday Emberwind session that will be going on, so all that'll be happening next week. But also on Tuesday, and I've been talking quite a bit about this on social media and on this channel, on Tuesday, the official launch of the Athos Arts Kickstarter to support the publication of my graphic novel Jelinek and the redone art for Icarus. This is something which I have been looking towards for actually many, many months. I finally announced this about almost a month ago that we were going to be doing this, and the launch is going to be at 12 noon Eastern on Tuesday, June 11th. We are very excited about this. I've started to post some of the art that Acela Fabio, who's incredible, has been doing. I think you can all see how amazing the art is if you've been looking at that, but it's going to require a big push from the community and a lot of you wonderful folks to be able to support us. So I hope whether you are watching this live or watching the VOD that you will be able to jump on board, mark your calendar, and then support us at the Icarus/Jelinek Kickstarter by Athos Arts. And again, we will have that up and running as of Tuesday, June 11th. So that is next Tuesday at 12 noon Eastern Daylight Savings Time. So we hope to see you all there. And then, as I said, Origins and on from there. So a lot of really awesome things happening this month, and I'm super excited about it. The other thing I want to mention very quickly, because Kat is also involved in this, is the Hearts of Wulin. Oh my God! Turbo Tango, almost on cue, you could say. Thank you for the resub, Turbo Tango. I appreciate that. Turbo Tango, who is also better known as Mr. Michael R. Underwood. And Mike, of course, is joining us with the Hearts of Wulin campaign. For those of you who have not seen, we have announced the players for this as well. Mike is one of those players, as is Cat. This is our amazing Wuxia Theater new show that we are going to be featuring here with Lowell Francis, Cat's brother, actually, who is one of the developers and is the GM for this. It is going to be an ongoing campaign once a month. Very, very excited about this. What's up, Brahms? Very excited about this. It is a really cool and different thing for Twitch. It's not something that usually happens. Oh my God, again. I can't even get any further because people just keep subbing. You're lovely, wonderful people, and I love all of you. Thank you so much, Kerflop, for the resub. I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. That 10-month resub, thank you. That is very, very kind of you. Thank you. But yes, so Hearts of Wulin, which is this amazing Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Kung Fu, romance combination. It's really cool stuff, very cinematic, storytelling based, and we're going to be doing that again, as I said, starting on Monday, the 24th. So Monday, the 24th of June, which is about a little over 2.5 weeks, basically, is going to be the first premiere session. I don't think they're continuing with the previous story, maybe, but it'll be the first premiere session for the permanent campaign, and I'm very excited about that. So we'll have some more announcements leading up to that as well. So lots of cool stuff happening on the channel. Super excited about it, and yeah, I cannot wait to see all of that stuff going on. But now it is time for us to move onto the premiere event, if you will, the main event of the evening. And that, of course, is the wonderful second class from the live Twitch version of the Rambo Academy for Wayward Writers. And this is creating engaging characters. And so I'm going to transition over now. Ah ha ha! Look at that. It works beautifully. That wonderful overlay brought to us by the amazing Kilobyte. Thank you, Kilobyte, as always. And we are here with, of course, Cat Rambo. Cat, pleasure to have you here as always. How are you? How is life in the world on the left coast? Left coast is best coast, you and my wife might say.
And I agree. Life is pretty good. We have nice weather, and my gardening is going well, and I'm going to Origin soon. So
yes,
nice
and you will. That's right. That's right. Kat will be at there as well, as will Mike. As will all. I mean, really, if you're not there. I was about to say you're not a good person. That's not true. There's many, many good people who won't be there, but you're a better person. No, I'm just joking. But nonetheless, you should come to Origins if you can. There's a lot of fun stuff going on there. If any of you have been to Gen Con, and I know that Kat has, and Mike has as well. So Origins really, this writer program kind of wants to be a sort of smaller version of the Writer Symposium. In fact, in a lot of ways, it reminds me of what the symposium was like about 10, 15 years ago. And it was started by the same person. Gene Raby started the Origins Library and was heavily invested in the Writers' Symposium at Gen Con for many, many years. And so, yeah, we have a really good crew of people. Kat, Carlos, Mike Underwood, Tobias Buckell is going to be there. We've got a lot of other lesser known but wonderful writers. Sarah Hans, who's a writer that I have a lot of admiration for, writes really good stuff, is going to be there. And of course, our guests of honor, Mercedes Lackey and Larry Dixon. They are, most people should know who they are, but if you haven't, they are characters for sure. And of course, Mercedes is a very fine writer. So yeah, we have a lot of really good people there, and I'm excited for us to do that, and that will be happening next week. But today, we have got the Rambo Academy for Wayward Writers, and I believe the title of this class is going to be, if I'm not mistaken, Creating Engaging Characters. And so I will now sneak out of the way and allow Kat to take over. I should say one last thing to chat, people who are just coming in now. So you can feel free to chat about this and ask questions as we go along. Again, this is the second trial period, so feel free to throw those questions out there as we go. Also, Kat will leave some time at the end to take some questions as well for sort of like an Ask Me Anything. So this is useful, by the way, for whether you're doing regular writing or game writing or anything in that ballpark. This isn't just if you want to write short stories and fiction in the speculative world. This is useful, I think, on a lot of different levels. So with that said, I will shut up, and Kat, the floor is yours.
Okay. Well, in the last class, as you may or may not remember, I talked about world building. And that's because I think there are basically three pillars to a story. And the first is world building. The second is character. And then in the next class, I'm going to talk about the mysterious third, which probably people could guess. Characters are I like to think of it a lot like a video game when I'm thinking in terms of point of view. And you probably know that there's different kinds of point of view. There's first person point of view, where it's the character that's talking directly to you. There's second person point of view, which is this kind of odd thing where the author is saying you, and you're sort of aware that it's not you, but it sort of is you, and it's somewhat confusing. And then you've got third person, and third person can be attached or it can be omniscient. And if you think about it in video game terms, first person is very much like those video games where you're actually inside the character's head and you're looking out through their eyes. Whereas third person is a little bit more like World of Warcraft, where you're perpetually kind of seeing the character receding from you. Oh, that's a good one. Laurie Moore's short story is a good example, second person. And then omniscient is more like, let's say, like Civ, right? Where you're seeing everything and you're not particularly picking out one character or another. You may check in on different ones, but it's going to be a lot of different stuff. The thing about your character is that your character is really integral to how your reader perceives the story. Your character is the lens through which everything is filtered. And I'm going to leave omniscient point of view kind of on the shelf by itself, because that's worthy of a whole class in and of itself. This is mostly about first person and third person attached. And when I talk about it being filtered through the character's viewpoint, that's it, right? The character is your constraint on what you can and can't do. And I can't impersonate R very well, but I could try. I don't know. So one of the places where this happens is in what they notice. And not just what they notice, but how they see it. And so a really good example is your character's mood is probably going to affect how they perceive things. And I think you probably know that feeling. Like there's the days when you roll out of bed and everything's fabulous. And there's the days when you roll out of bed and kind of starts by stubbing your toe, and then the cat is out of cat food, and then various other mishaps occur. And because the rest of the day ends up influenced by that. Because if you're in a good mood, kind of good stuff tends to happen more than if you're in a bad mood. And that's really not so much happening as you're noticing it more, right? What you notice is affected by your mood. One of the writing exercises that I use in my classes to illustrate this, and you're welcome to try this at home, is take a occasion that's either very happy, traditionally either very happy or very sad. So like a happy would be a birthday party or a wedding. Sad might be a mass layoff at a corporation or a funeral or a divorce or something like that. But, some occasion. And then write it from the point of view of a character whose mood is completely at odds with that. For example, someone who is happy at the funeral or someone who is sad at the children's birthday party. And if you try that, it's really interesting to take the same incident and try it from different points of view and think about the character's mood and whether they're going to think of things happily, or they're going to think of things in a kind of sad way. They're going to think of things in an angry way. I have a friend who assumes everything is negative, right? I could say to him, I just got this great thing, and he would be like, oh, that's fucking, why did they give that to you? And I'd be like, oh no, that's good, it's really good. You don't have to attend a funeral for the writing exercise. You could imagine it or pick another. I kind of want to hear the story of how you snapped your leg on the sidewalk, though. That sounds kind of awful and glorious at the same time. Anyway, so let me talk more about kind of like how viewpoint affects what a character sees. It's going to reflect their education and what they know. For example, when I go outside with my friend Ursula, she knows the names of all the birds, whereas I know the names of some of the birds. And my husband doesn't know the name of any of the birds. And so if it's filtered through Ursula's point of view, then yes, all the birds will be named. it's filtered through my point of view, it is not valid to name birds if I wouldn't know that name. And similarly, my husband would just be brown bird, gray bird, bluebird. Okay. Someone who is well educated is probably, and this is going to apply very much to first person, where the character is speaking directly to you, is going to use language that reflects that education. They're going to use words that they know. If you have a 6-year-old, right, and they're describing a house, they're not going to go into elaborate architectural detail and talk about the gables on the windows unless they are an extraordinarily precocious child. And I salute the bird community back. And I wanted to say, I'm happy to answer questions if people want to put them in chat as I go along. I don't have to wait for the end. And sometimes that's useful for me. I'm working off a set of notes and I may have overlooked stuff. So other things that are going to affect what your character perceives are, what are your character's goals and needs? Because if that is something in the room that your character needs, then by golly, they are going to perceive it. If they want food, they are going to be looking around to see where the food is in the room. If they want to case the joint because they're going to come back later as a burglar and steal the jewels, then they're going to be looking at the security system, right? So what they want out of the room affects what they're going to notice. One of my favorite examples is, let's say you had 3 D&D characters that walk into a stereotypical tavern. Then your first one is an assassin. And so what's your assassin going to be noticing? What's going to come up in their description? Well, they're going to be describing what are the possible escape routes? What are the possible dangers in the room? Is there a target in the room? Who are their possible threats? Whereas the bard who painted the mural that's on the tavern wall is not going to be looking for that. They're going to be looking at the fact that the tavern keeper once again put the oil lamps too close to the mural and it's getting all smoky. And this is how you show what your character wants, right? You don't have to come out and say, my character wants X. You show them noticing it. You show them thinking about it. You show them scheming how to get it. It reflects their fears and hopes. Someone who is scared of insects is going to regard and describe that crawl space in a lot different terms, or very different terms, than, say, the scientist who hopes to discover a new species of centipede underneath there, right? They're going to describe things totally different. Ooh, that's a good question. So how can you make a character that's neither good or evil? How can you decide the best personality for a character like that? Well, I mean, one of the things that you want to remember is that human beings are pretty complicated, and that even the most villainous characters usually didn't sort of roll off the assembly line for evil overlords. And so you want characters, I don't know that you want to think in terms of good and evil. You want to think in terms of strengths and weaknesses, virtues and flaws. And so a character who's a virtuous character should have a flaw or two. That's going to give you all sorts of plot points. It's going to give you all sorts of ways to raise the stakes, and it's going to make them much more relatable. Okay. Yeah, that's good. Brahms mentions, think about someone who thinks they're doing something for the right reason. And that's it. That's another thing about characters, is that people will forgive a character doing all sorts of stuff as long as the character is trying to do their best, as long as the character is actually working in good faith. We don't like characters who are slacking. We don't like characters who are making bad decisions because they're just like, I know it's a bad decision. Well, I mean, actually, I could think of characters you might like who had that attitude. But you're going to want a mix of flaws. And similarly, if you've got a bad character, an evil character, they're your villain or your antagonist, you want them to have some virtues. One of the most interesting kinds of villains you can have are the ones that you're kind of like, oh, but they're kind of cool, right? I do speak softly. Yeah, even inherently evil people may have a different point of view. And let's think about that also. You know, sometimes people make bad choices. And often it's how they react to those choices and the consequences of those choices that we end up perceiving as good or evil. Because good people screw up and they try to fix it. And bad people screw up and kind of either don't worry about it or kind of take glory in it. One of my favorite books or favorite series of books is Daniel Abraham's The Dagger and the Coin, which is a fantasy series about it's about banking, among other things. But the villain in that book, which is a five book series, is someone who is at first presented to you as a very likable, sympathetic character. And as the books proceed, you see them make decisions. And you see them make decisions and you understand why they make those decisions. And it's how they react afterwards that makes them start to slide into villainy. Yeah, I think it is important for a villain to think they're right. It is important, and that's going to be a much more interesting villain if they are absolutely convinced that what they are doing is correct and that they have to do it. Yeah. Otherwise, they're just like, I'm going to be evil, mwah, ha, 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 which is sort of boring. Giving the villain something that the hero can relate to and sympathize with, yeah, it's a great moral imperative. And in fact, if you have a character that you want to make more likable, like a villain, show them caring about something. Give them a plant or a pet or anything, really. So we're scrolling, so I want to make sure that I don't miss it. Yeah, everyone is the hero of their own story. There's a wonderful Austin Grossman book, and it's about superheroes, and it's told from the point of view of, it's alternating chapters, one from the point of view of the superhero and one from the villain. And one of the things that makes the book so interesting is that the villain is by far the more likable of the two. Another thing that going to tell you something about your character through what they notice is what they don't notice, what they take for granted. If they are an English noble, for example, they may think themselves alone in the room when actually there's servants there. It's probably a somewhat classist example. But, we don't notice stuff. And sometimes we should, and sometimes your character should, but they don't look at it. And that can be really interesting too, particularly if you know that they should be noticing it. A couple of exercises that I also use in classes, kind of when we're drilling down on this, one is to take a room and describe it from the point of view of someone who desperately wants to escape it. And you might make it a very pleasant room. In fact, it's going to be a more interesting piece if you make it a very pleasant room rather than something like a dungeon cell. But write it from the point of view of somebody who's just like, I have to get out of here. And maybe not even say why they have to get out of there, but show it in what they're noticing. Maybe they're feeling sick, and so they're noticing the heat of the room or the fact that they're a little dizzy. Another possible exercise that I think is really useful in sort of when you're fine-tuning your viewpoint skills is to take a character who knows something really, really well, who knows cooking, for example, and knows all the ins and outs of the terms. Someone who is a carpenter and knows all the terms for things that I cannot put a name to right now. And that does mean that's probably going to be something that you're going to have to draw on from either your experience or a lot of research. But describe a different action, something that's not related to that field, but do it in those terms. So, for example, have somebody who is a cook trying to describe assembling an IKEA table. Questions about any of that? I mean, this is one of the cardinal rules, is that usually you pick a point of view and you stick with it and you don't hop around a lot. And when you have a character, particularly when you have a character that's a third person attached and they're noticing that there's things appearing that they shouldn't be seeing, it's going to jar your reader. We have certain expectations of the different points of view. So how do you create a character that a reader likes? And I'm going to argue that it is essential for a character to be someone that the reader likes, because if the reader doesn't care about the character, they are going to stop reading, right? If it is a character, unless it's assigned for some reason, or you're deeply curious, or you've been told there's a smutty section somewhere down the line, most of the time you're going to put the book down. It's just not going to be interesting. You have to care about the character. You have to care about what happens to them, because you have to be reading. You have to want to read to find out what happens next. Yeah, that's absolutely Aaron Daniel X4. A carpenter would have dozens of words for nails and screws, and a person doing IKEA table would be, yeah. Well, no, the carpenter. So I said a cook doing the IKEA table. So the carpenter actually might be interesting to describe them cooking a meal in terms of carpentry, assembling the meal. Like, how would they think of it? Like, me cooking a meal is just like assembling a table. How? Does that make sense? Yeah. Arv's mentioning Faulkner's Sound and Fury. And I will say, when we talk about Faulkner, Faulkner's kind of like a master class in literature and is notoriously difficult to read. But yeah, you get that kind of shifting viewpoints, and it is disorienting. It is, that's an effect that you can play with, right? That's one of the things that you can do with your writing, is deliberately unsettle the reader. The thing is that you want to do it deliberately, right? You don't want to do it accidentally. And that's the thing about writing rules, is that you can break any rule you like, as long as you're doing it in a way that shows that that you understand that there's a rule about this and you're deliberately breaking it. Yeah, and Faulkner has rules. Yeah, that's it exactly. You can't do this, just be like, sort of, I'm going to roll a dice and shift viewpoints every time I roll a 6 or something like that. Yeah, absolutely. Joyce wrote Portrait long before Ulysses, and then follows that up with Finnegan's Wake, which is perhaps one of the 10 hardest books in the English language to read. Yeah. Okay. So how do you make a character likable? Let me return back to that. You need to have things that your reader identifies with. And I would argue that it is more important to have things that are internal than external. I think it is important to have representation and diversity, and to have a big cast and lots of interesting stuff. But I think that in terms of identification, one of the things that's going to appeal to all readers is going to be emotional identification, internal identification. And that can be pain, and it can be physical pain, but emotional pain is going to be much more interesting. Now, why is that interesting? It's because we all know what it's like to feel emotional pain. And that's what you're doing often when you're writing science fiction, is, you don't know what it's like to be a creature from Beetlejuice bent on conquering the universe, but you know how you feel when you are feeling determined and ready to conquer the world. You can draw upon those emotions. And I'd strongly urge that you do. And I think that's one of the things that we're talking about when people bring up the advice, write what you know. Right? You know your emotions. One example that I often use is Richie Rich comic books. And I may be dating myself, and I hope that Richie Rich is not passed away so long that no one can remember him. But it was basically a comic book series. It was about Richie Rich, the world's richest boy. And Richie Rich was perhaps not a great choice of protagonist, because it's hard to identify with the problems of being rich, right? Oh, my house has too many rooms. Oh, I've got this bathroom full of gold coins. Oh no. And so what the comics focus on is Richie Rich has trouble making friends. And so the comics are about Richie's struggle to make friends most of the time. That's why I would argue Casper the Friendly Ghost, which is probably the same dynamic, was a bit more successful, simply because Casper was a bit more identifiable with. I hope I'm making sense. Every once in a while I'm teaching, I get the feeling I'm being incoherent because I can't see any of you. Usually when I'm teaching online, I can see everybody's little face and people are nodding or frowning or puzzlement. Okay. Anyway, so we talked about also, have a character that's trying to do their best. I think that's really important. That's it. And give them something that they care about. So you're asking, what if you want a reader to hate a character? How can we do that? Some bad deeds won't make the reader hate a character. Well, some bad deeds will. And for example, I gave my mother a book called Red Sunday by Thomas Harris recently. And it's by the same guy that wrote the Hannibal and Red Dragon and stuff. And she actually gave it back to me and said, hey, I stopped about a third of the way in. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. You don't usually stop. And what was the moment where you bounced out? And she said, well, the bad guy does something to show he's a bad guy. And I'm not going to say it actually, because it's a really kind of horrific thing. You can go read it if you need to, but it's totally gratuitous. And he just sort of does it in this like emotionless manner. It's just sort of clearly like the author going, see, this guy's super bad. Don't do that. Show them doing something bad, and it can be even something small, but enjoying it or planning it or, taking active pleasure in it. All right. It is really important though. I mean, because, go back to that idea of the video game. Your character is the point of view character is just like the character in the video game. And if you're not enjoying moving them around, if you're not invested in their story, if you're not kind of wanting to go on, you're not going to keep going. Yeah, what is it? It was the Star Wars game where you could was it Knights of the Old Republic? You could go either the dark side or light side, and it was reflected in your character's appearance. And notice it was a slow slide downward, and you kept kind of, if you played to the dark side, you started making decisions where you were kind of like, oh, well, I'm being greedy. Well, I don't care about this. Oh, I'm going to be a little mean. All right. Yeah, tyranny. That makes sense. Yeah, and I think there's been and Fable was another game where the choices that you made ended up shaping the storyline. And that's the other thing about a character is we do want to feel like they're doing things that affect the story. You want the story to be the result of what your character is doing. We all, or at least most of us, have that friend who has problems, and they come to you and say, I have this problem X. And like a good friend, you say, well, perhaps you should do Y. And then they say, well, what you don't understand is, And you say, well, how about you do this? And they go, well, what you don't understand is, And they just drive you nuts. And it's because they're not doing anything to get themselves out of their situation. A character really, most of the time, needs to be active, needs to be doing stuff. Yeah. Trying to think if there's anything more I want to say. Yeah, it is hard staying friends like that. And of course, you wouldn't want to read about them, right? If your character's just like, oh, and then I did this, and then some other stuff happened to me. You don't want events and I'm kind of skipping ahead to the next one here, but you don't want events to happen sort of this happens, and this happens, and this happens. You want it to be this happens, and because of it, this happens, and then we make this decision, and because of that, this happens. And so that's what you want in a story. Otherwise, it feels very flat. I like Holden Caulfield, but he is a somewhat he doesn't do a lot, but he's so engaging. But that actually is a really good segue to sort of the third point that I wanted to make about characters, which is that dialogue and voice are one of the keys to your character. Dialogue are what people say. Voice is the voice that the story is told in, right? And how can you make dialogue and voice something that the reader really wants just more and more of? First off, make it interesting by saying unexpected things. With dialogue, you don't need to convey all the minutia of hello, how are you, I'm fine, my mother's blah, 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 blah. Start with something interesting. Start with, my uncle just fell off the turnip truck and he's lying in the road, or something like that. I don't know why I said turnip truck. You can make it interesting by having an unreliable narrator. You can have a narrator that we don't quite trust what they're saying. We know that they're telling this story, but the reasons that they're telling the story may not be the reasons that they say they're telling the story. Nabokov's Pale Fire is one of my favorite examples of that. Or they may be a total innocent and naive who doesn't quite understand what's going on. Huckleberry Finn, one of the greatest books ever written, is that. Huck Finn does not understand what's going on around him most of the time. He is a naive innocent. Another way to make it interesting is make it funny. And even if you're doing a sad story, you can put a little humor in here and there. It will, in fact, sometimes make a sad story even sadder if you've got a little light note to relieve the darkness. And writing funny stuff is hard. Read funny stuff and you will be better at writing it. Finally, make it gossipy. We love to hear stories about other people. We love to hear things that other people have done, particularly if they're embarrassing or if they're got some sort of weird detail. I think one of the things that you want to do as a writer is you've got to study people. And you really have to start collecting people in terms of thinking about why they do the things they do, why they act the way they act. And writers, sometimes I'll be at a party or whatever, and I'll see a writer in the corner and they're just watching people. They're just listening to the conversation. You can see the kind of like little mill turning in their head, and they are packing it all away. Yes, and it is perfectly valid to use scraps of dialogue that you overheard, to use bits of stories. One of the greatest exercises that I ever got given when I was at Clarion West was Andy Duncan assigned us all to go out and eavesdrop and come back with 2 pages worth of eavesdropped conversation. So we had to go to a coffee shop or museum or just sit somewhere where we could listen to people. And we all came back with these transcripts of conversations, and they were hysterical, and they were wonderful, and they were funny, and they were real. They were just absolutely great stuff. Yeah, Trendane's mentioning it. You're monitoring stuff. You're storing away the details, because that's what makes a story good. That's what makes it, well, I mean, many things make a story good, but that's one of the things that makes a story good. It's got good dialogue. It's got interesting people. It's got people you care about. It's got people where you want to turn the page because you want to know what happens next to them, because you want to know what they do. And often, and this is the most important thing that you can know about a character, is that you must know what your character wants. If you know what your character wants, you've got actually a little algorithm that you can use to tell you what happens next whenever you're stuck, because you can think about it. What does my character want? How are they going to try about getting it now? And of course, the traditional structure is that they try and fail, they try and fail, and then they try and succeed. You do that, boom, you've got a story. It's that easy. That's pretty much a lot of my notes. I'm at a good stopping point. Tell me what questions you have about writing characters, because think about the great characters that you love. What is it that you like about them? What is it about characters that makes children pretend to be them? What is it that makes you fantasize either about being them or being around them? And I think that often as writers, sometimes writers will come to me and they'll say, oh, I can't read anymore. Writing has destroyed reading for me. And I say, oh, well, that's unfortunate because I love reading and continue to love reading. But the thing that you need to do as a writer is absolutely read first time for pleasure. Absolutely. But if it's a book that you really love or a book that you really hate, go back and spend some time figuring out why. Go back and think about what did the author do to elicit that reaction in you? Because they probably, in the first case, did it deliberately. And in the second case, maybe not, in which case you can learn from their error. I hope that makes sense. And I do think you should read. You should be reading all over the place. And don't just read fantasy and science fiction. Read nonfiction and poetry and biographies and classics of literature and Faulkner and a little Joyce every once in a while too. Because you can only write stuff that's as good as the best stuff that you're reading. Oh, that's a really good. Trendine's mentioning, I found a good person, bad person distinction is when a character will try to get what they want on their own versus using someone else to get it for them. That's a really good one. And I like that because particularly also you could have a villain using someone else to get it for them and causing all sorts of chaos for that person even though they know that it will destroy them. That is a kind of excellent plot right there. You should all go write that immediately. Other questions? So sometimes people get bogged down in character description and they talk about the clothing that a character is wearing or kind of their physical appearance. And I will suggest that when you're doing that, think more about how is that character trying to present themselves to the world? Is their clothing neatly pressed or is it rumpled? Did they bother to brush their hair? Is it greased down with pomade? So Game Master's Vault has, when it comes to music, I may like the music or the lyrics. I find that sometimes when I'm reading, I like a story more than the characters per se, or the setting more than the story. You find that to be common. I think, yeah, it does sometimes happen. And I would argue that if you're with skilled authors, usually they're managing to come up with a balance of the three things. Totally. And often it's the story world. I mean, how many times have you read a story and you're kind of like, I don't really care about these people. I want to know more about this side character. I want to know about this, particular custom, or I want to know what this legend is that they're talking about. And I think that's one of the things that often you do when you're going back and editing and fixing stories is you do go back and try and say, do things appear in equal measure? Have I put enough work into the world building that it stands up to the character building? Have I put enough story in there to carry the character through the world? Oh, that's so good. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit last time with the world building. And I think that it's just absolutely true. You have to use sensory stuff and smell and taste, because TV gives us vision, gives us sound, so those are kind of overplayed. Smell and taste and physical sensation, and again, go back to pain. Pain is a physical sensation. Temperature is a physical sensation. Dizziness is a physical sensation. The feeling of being in a crowded, stuffy room and being unable to breathe is a physical sensation. And those are physical sensations that your reader will be familiar with. So it's another point of identification. I read for the Norton Awards a number of years ago, and I was really surprised by how many books started out with a character in physical distress of some kind. And then I thought, well, yeah, that's actually a valid strategy. It pulls you in right away. And there's also a kind of weird pleasure to reading, and this is a little macabre perhaps, but the reader is in a pleasurable position in that they are aware of the character's pain and seeing it, but at the same time very aware that they are not themselves physically feeling it. So it's like we kind of safely experience these things. And that's one of the things that reading does, is it often lets us experience things that we wouldn't experience otherwise. That's one of the things that you bring to your stories, is you experience the world differently than anyone else. And so your job is to bring that to the story, because there are no new plots. I hate to tell you, you're not going to discover a new story, or if you do, please tell me so I can steal it. But most of the time, you're telling the same stories over and over again. Romeo and Juliet. How many times has that story been told? No, Shakespeare stole all over the place. God, I love Shakespeare. Just everything. Chaucer too. You go look at the Canterbury Tales, and those are just pulled from all over the place. Yeah. Oh, Shakespeare was a genius in so many ways. And one of the things that you kind of curse Shakespeare for is he invented so many figures of speech that nowadays are cliche, right? Yeah. And so you should be reading Shakespeare. You know, I know that sounds like I'm sending you back to high school or college, but boy, get some Shakespeare and read it out loud. It is so beautiful. It's just so beautiful. Yeah, steal all the things. I mean, what is it Picasso said? Good artists borrow, great artists steal. You take things and you make them your own. You read something, you're like, I really like the way Joe Abercrombie handled that transition. I'm going to do something very similar. That's a valid thing to do. Oh, Ian McDonald is that author. Yeah. There's a lot of, I mean, and you know, we're talking about kind of world building and setting and character, you know, one eclipsing the other. Another element of that would be language. There are some writers where the language is just so gorgeous that you just immersed in it. And I think Cat Valenti's The Orphan's Tales, it's just like eating ripe peaches that are still warm from the sun. It is just beautiful, lush, gorgeous, delicious language. Um, if you haven't read her new book, Space Opera, it is terrific. And it is also not as lush and variegated, but it is absolutely wonderful if you liked Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Hardly recommend. My favorite mythological character. Oh, holy cow. I would have to say Odysseus, simply because he is a trickster. He's kind of a scoundrel, and he kind of gets away with some stuff that he shouldn't, but he keeps fighting to get back to Ithaca. And so I do like Odysseus. He thinks of all clever things. Any other questions? Because I'm about to wind up with some stuff. Orpheus is lovely. Orpheus is a wonderful story to retell. That's one of the things you can do with all these myths is go back and mine them. Oh, does the genre? No, yeah, I think the genre doesn't have much impact on characters. And in fact, some of my favorite books are mashups where someone's taken a sort of noir detective and put it in space. And certainly The Expanse, right, has the detective has, I think, resonances with a lot of mystery characters as well. And yeah, I mean, people are people, and people are complicated, weird, wonderful things that are composed, I would argue, of mostly good stuff, but everybody's got an inner core of shittiness. Oh, what if you're writing aliens? That is actually, you should check out Shannon McGuire's class that she does for me on cryptozoology and xenozoology, because she talks about that. There, I think you're going to have to figure out what they want, and that's going to be your best starting point, because that's going to tell you something about how they behave, and that's going to tell you something about how they interact with people. The Dresden Files. Yeah, I love the Dresden Files. In fact, my godchild is named Dresden for Harry Dresden. Deckard is another good example. Yeah, I love ancillary justice, and I think that's wonderful, because that's another question is, right, how not just to write from the point of view of an alien, but how do you write from the point of view of an artificial intelligence? That's a kind of wacky stuff that gets kind of. From a world building standpoint, do I feel any world with the right characters and minor tweaks could be changed for any genre there? I think you could certainly give it a good try. I would suspect that probably more stuff would allow that to happen than one might think. I'm sure that there's some stuff that would be really intractable. And I'm trying to think of what would be, I'm just being cautious there. No, and actually I can't think of something. And often, really good stories come out of those translations, out of taking something from one genre and sticking it in another, or riffing off it. I'm finishing up a story right now that's for an anthology of speculative fiction inspired by the Beatles. And so it's kind of fun because I love the Beatles with all my heart and soul. And so it's fun to sort of take bits of Beatles lore and stick it into a science fiction story that's taking place post-apocalypse. All right. I am going to start winding down here unless there are more questions, because it is 6:06 here on the West Coast, and at some point I'd like to go eat my dinner. But I'm happy to answer a few more if you've got them. Next time, I'm going to talk about plotting and structure. Yeah, it would be really hard to outthink something that could figure out, and that's one of the things speculative fiction writers try to wrap their heads around all the time, right? You think about how would people, I mean, just even how are people going to think 20 years down the line when we have various augmentations that help us with how we think? I'm assuming that's going to happen, assuming the Earth is not a barren void by that time. So, and I love near future science fiction, because often what it's doing is talking about today and talking about, like, what happens if here's this thing, what happens if we pull it out a little further. I have a story called Red in Tooth and Cog, and that is because I was reading about self-repairing machines. And I thought, what if we had self-repairing appliances, and then what happens when those self-repairing appliances get dumped? And so I came up with my story full of feral appliances living in a park. All right. Arv, are you around? Because I'm gonna start mentioning a couple of things to wind down. Oh, you are. I can see you on mute. Okay. So I'll mention. Well, you have, of course, because you've been chatting. Um, I do want to mention that this weekend, Rachel Swirsky is teaching speculative poetry on my school, and that there's also a couple classes coming up. One is Carrie Vaughn's Masks and Mayhem, which is about writing superheroes, which I think is going to be a super cool class. My trick is that I schedule classes that I want to take myself. Carrie has been writing some superhero novels, and she also writes in the Wild Cards universe, which I think is awfully cool. And then Shannon McGuire is going to do a class called Pacing Yourself, the strange and sprawling art of writing a series. And if anyone is well qualified to talk about that, it is Shannon McGuire, and she is always a fabulous, fascinating teacher. So check that out if you get the chance. All right, Arv, back to you. Oops. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm.
I forgot that I was muted. Sorry, my bad. Never mind. Let me tell you. Cat can tell you.
Oh.
What a great question I just had. No. God damn it! I forgot to unmute myself on my mic. Sorry.
Sorry, they've all been staring.
They didn't hear any of that. She could hear me on Zoom. She's like, "Oh, that's great. That's
I know
wonderful."
he's listening. All right.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah, that's great.
Could you restate the question,
Good
please?
gosh. Yes,
Mr.
let me
R?
restate the question. So what I was saying, and I'm going to say it now far more, irrationally, it'll be all incredibly stupid. Anyway, so what I was saying was that it is sometimes hard to extricate the characters from the setting in which they are placed, because the characters build the world in a way and the world builds them. And so, I mentioned before the example of Rick Deckard, but Deckard is, to me, a part and parcel of this sort of post-apocalyptic, really, or at least highly dystopian world of post-World War terminus LA. Post-World War terminus Bay Area. And so he's going to be like a noir detective, because you're not going to have happy sunshine characters that exist on a world like that. So what I guess I wanted to ask was, do you find yourself in circumstances ever where you're writing a world or writing a character and the world and character doesn't quite sync up in your mind the way that it should? In other words, you have a character that's great, but they just don't fit this, grimdark Joe Abercrombie style environment that you were trying to paint for them. And if that happens, do you find yourself shaping the world differently to match your character, or darkening the character emotionally so as to reflect the world? Or do you pull them aside and just say, you know what, I love this character, but you just don't belong here? And obviously this would happen earlier on, I would imagine, in the process, but I'm just curious if that ever happens, how you deal with characters and I suppose actions, but really characters that are out of sync with the world that you established for them.
So two things about that. And one is that my answer would probably differ according to how the story started for me in terms of an idea. And if it had started as the character, like a character had come to me and said, write my story, I would probably kind of lean more in the direction. Whereas if I was like, oh, it's Tibet, a setting, established setting, I'm not going to change Tibet. But, oh God, what was the other thing I was going to say? It's completely flipped. No. You can always do weird shit, right? I mean, think about the Jasper Fforde books. I mean, the Jasper Fforde books are basically literary characters yanked out of their books and thrown into a strange new world. Right. And so, I'm sorry. I'm trying to think of time. Oh, okay. Now I've remembered what I was going to say. Sometimes characters start running away with the story, right? Sometimes characters, like you're writing and there's this side character and they keep popping up and being like, well, maybe this is my story, and what's happened there is that you have given them too much description. You have given them too much time, and they have taken so much time on the stage that they're sort of like, well, maybe I am the main star. And that's a point where you have to decide, would this be a better story if it was this character? And in which case, maybe it is. But otherwise, if you're not, you have to go back and kneecap them by removing the pieces that sort of have allowed them to step up that way.
Are you?
Anne Leckie used that term, kneecapping.
That sounds like Anne. Are you ever able to bolt those part? I mean, I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine characters being this modular, but could you bolt parts of the character that you liked onto the character that really is the main part of the story, or combine them, I guess, because I have sat on panels where people talked about combining characters that really are basically just several elements of one personality, and that just somehow got separated out, or not. I'm just curious.
Well, and I'll point out, you're using the word bolt, which implies a certain amount of mechanical effort, and I think that's very expressive. And it just as if you wanted to bolt something onto your car, it might look natural, and it might look like you put a big robot arm on your car, which would be super cool.
I was gonna say, I don't know what the problem is.
Yeah. That's what we're gonna do the V across next. I don't know. Have I answered your question? Because I can't, other than like a character kind of being like, well, maybe this is my story, and sometimes I have been like, oh yeah, shit, it is your story. I can't think of points where characters get changed like that. And part of it is, I think, when a character pops into my head, they've got some core elements, and those core elements kind of shape what belongs in them and doesn't.
Right. Okay. So really, in a way, if you have a character that sort of goes off the rails, a lot of times that's maybe because you haven't really understood what the character is about,
Yeah.
right? Or
Yeah.
you haven't
Yeah.
really figured out what the character wants, as you said, or
Right.
really the implications of them. And maybe that's a way to avoid to create characters and not types,
Right.
not just sort of aspects of it. You know, and I agree with you, Ardinell, about Boba Fett. Although I actually like the image of him being Boba Fest, but that would be all different. Happy Boba Fest, everyone. No, but Boba Fett is like that. But I think part of that is because we knew so little about him, right? He's just this dude, and we're like, well, he hunts Jedi.
Yeah.
Like, how does that even happen? So in a way, it was his mystery that made him interesting, in a very similar way to the way Shakespeare handles Iago and Othello. Iago is, as I think I talked about this previously, but Stephen Greenblatt called this strategic opacity. He pulls away the motive for Iago to do what he does to Othello, and thus makes him infinitely more fascinating. Because, you know, if you have characters like, for example, Hannibal Lecter, did anyone think Hannibal Lecter became more interesting when you found out that the reason he did all this stuff is because he had a bad childhood? I mean, or did you find him more interesting precisely because there was something somewhat inscrutable about him? And that's different, by the way, from not knowing, like from the author just sort of taking a guess. It's about what they're willing to reveal, right? The author may know what makes the character tick, but by carefully displaying only parts of it, you know, that can, to the audience, that can kind of build mystery. It seems as well. The two I was going to mention about this in terms of characters that are unusual that way, that almost run away with it. Satan in Milton's Paradise Lost almost runs away with that poem, and Milton was himself conscious of it. And as a committed Christian, you really can't have Satan be the hero of your story. And so what he does is he just reduces him, and he becomes more and more petty and smaller, and so he becomes less likable over time. And then the other one I want to mention, I don't know if you know this particular book, Silverlock, John Myers Myers.
John Myers. Yes.
So Silverlock was one of my father's favorites, and a lot of people don't know that now. But that's, you know, basically this guy lands on an island, and then you get 6 quadrillion literary references that this guy has to interact with. And it's a very, at times, very moving book, I think, because it's got that stranger in a strange land field, but because all of these characters are really represented in the way that we would imagine them to be, you know, if they were in that land. So, but no, you did answer my question. I guess I was just curious about that idea of characters seeming out of place with their surroundings, and what we do in those what we do in those scenarios, whether that's something that that doesn't happen to us because we're really careful and we make sure that's not the case, or whether or not we find that sometimes we have to therefore take either the setting or the character in a different direction. So that's why I was curious about that. So Heinlein is my favorite
Heinlein.
author.
I like Heinlein a lot. I read huge amounts of Heinlein as a child. He has that lovely, he has a very plain style. He doesn't get in the way, but he also, I think The Green Hills of Earth is one of the most perfect stories ever written. Is just so, and that is just full of beautiful language. And Heinlein, we were talking about reading, Heinlein read all over the place, which
very broadly. I want to put in a note for Ursula Le Guin's style too. Because she has such a delightful, like, these sentences and structures. There's in Wizard of Earthsea, the line when Ged escapes being tempted by this demon called Pterodon, and the line is, he had not consented. It is very hard for evil to take hold of the unconsenting soul. God, they just what? Like, it's such. There's such depth and I mean, she, of course, is Ursula Le Guin, but
she's got
so wonderful.
I've got one of my favorite books over here, and I would, if I weren't tethered with earphones, I would pull it out. But she's got a collection of stories called The Real and the Unreal, which is a collection that she picked.
Yeah.
And reading through that is like a masterclass in in writing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great regret of mine that I never got a chance to
Mm.
speak or interview her before she passed. But anyway, all right. Well, we will sort of bring this to a close. This was always, as always, wonderful, Cat. Like at one point, Game Master's Vault pointed out that the reason people didn't talk at various points because they're just nodding and furiously taking notes. You know, they're not asking questions. They're just like, this is great. Like write this, write this. So it was great.
Well, that's good.
I really, really enjoyed it. And Chad, I hope you folks enjoyed it as well. And what's up, Satolba? How you doing, man? But this was really, really wonderful stuff. And so just to confirm again, so next month you're going to be doing one on plotting, I believe I heard you say, which is awesome. I am very, very excited to hear that. And I will be, of course, furiously taking notes about that as well. And I just want to mention that those, of course, everyone was able to sort of fire back questions and so forth. Starting next month, what we're going to try to do is do that for people who are either subbed or supporting the Patreon at a certain level to the channel. And part of the exactly, audience is not sleeping, they're spellbound. Exactly, there's a big difference. But that sort of thing, I think will be very helpful for people to sort of see some of the value that comes out of these classes. And in fairness, I mean, and Kat does not usually do these classes for free because one should be paid for what they do. So this is really kind of, you know, a gift to the larger community that we had a couple of these trial runs. And so we're going to try to increase that monetization. So what I would ask is if you know folks who are interested in this kind of thing and who love writing, first of all, tell them that there's this channel that does a lot of stuff with that here. But secondly, tell them to look, number one, at the Rambo Academy for Wayward Writers, which Kat conducts not just through Twitch, of course, but does this as well on her own with many different presenters like Shauna McGuire and Rachel Skorsky and others that she's mentioned. But as well, please let them know about this because, again, Kat will be here once a month doing this. And I love these classes. I mean, this is just, I could sit here and listen to a master talk shop all day. So I love this kind of thing. And I'd like to be able to communicate that to others. So, and yes, so kittywampus.net/blog/academy. I've also, as I said, been tweeting this repeatedly and I will put up links to that. We're going to have some kind of a cool intro video as well soon, although I'm a fan of this overlay and this setup. I think this works really well, but I do want to have something that, you know, more bells and whistles as appropriate to Kat's stature. But always a pleasure, Kat. It was wonderful. Thank you so much. Of course, we will see you with Esper Genesis, where she will not be wielding a quill but a hammer tomorrow, so it'll be a little bit different. But thank you, Cyborg Sellout. Please type that all over the place too. I'm all about that. I'm very happy to talk about Jelinek. But thank you so much, Kat. This was wonderful. Anywhere else that people should know in terms of writing things from you / classes that you're conducting and so forth that you want to talk about here?
No, just check out the classes. I've got classes going, and then I'm actually, if you're interested in writing, one of the things I'm starting to do on my Patreon, and I just did the first one today, is editing sessions, which is basically I screen share. It's like a little 10-minute video. And it's just me editing a passage, talking as I go about why I'm making the choices that I'm making, which may be incredibly boring or might be the next ASMR video. I don't know.
Either way, it would actually work really well. And so there was one thing I was looking for that I could just mention about the links. Oh, yes, this is what it was. I was going to mention the panel schedule, and I just wanted to say that if you were interested in hearing more, if you are going to be in the Columbus, Ohio area, Kat is going to be there as part of the Origins Library. And so Kat will be speaking on short stories. She will be speaking on, she'll be talking about reading for writers. I'm going to be on that panel with her. So we talked about the importance of reading. That's going to be happening. She will be actually moderating a panel on effective illusions. She will be doing a panel as well on professional writing organizations. I don't know why she knows anything about SIFWA, but, you know, I mean, I guess, you know, maybe she has some minor thing to say about organizations. And then branding and marketing yourself and your content, and I'll be actually on that panel with her as well. So if you are interested in having a chance to speak to Kat directly or hear more of her, you know, wonderful insights on the world of writing, definitely do that. And yes, and also support her brother, Lowell Francis's Kickstarter, because he is also the GM for the Hearts of Wulin campaign, which is going to be held live on this channel. So go over there and support it, because it is good stuff, and I'm very excited to have him and her on the channel doing that as well. But that is going to do it, I think, for us. I will let Kat go. Thank you so much, as always, Kat. This was wonderful. I will see you tomorrow for Esper Genesis.
Take care, everyone. Talk to you soon.
Bye for now. Alrighty. And that is going to do it for me as well. In just a moment, he said as he transitioned over, "You thought I wasn't here. You thought that I was perhaps doing this from my bathrobe, but you're wrong. I was here the whole time." I don't know why you would think I'd be doing this from my bathrobe, but anyway, no, I was here and the whole time. But this was awesome. It was a great pleasure, as always, to have Kat with us. Yeah, now we've actually had a chance to do 2 of these classes. I hope you folks are finding these enjoyable as I am. You know, frankly, even if people didn't like them, I would still do them, because I really, this is my jam, basically. This is stuff that I really, really love. And it's, you know, it's not easy to get classes of this level. There's a lot of garbage advice, frankly, out there from people who have never published and don't know what they're doing. And it is really nice to be able to get stuff from people that are not like that and actually do know what they're doing, and actually care about helping people with it. And so I'm very, very glad that we're able to, I'm very lucky that I was able to have Kat do this for us. And as I say, we will continue to push this as we go forward. And please, please spread the word, because spreading the word about this will make it useful. No bathrobe, but no pants either. I have jeans, let me tell you. But anyway, but that is going to do it for me for tonight. I will be back, of course, tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern, I believe, is when we have it set for Esper Genesis. You will see Kat again. You will also see Carlos and Zach, and Johnny Pittman will be back as well. That campaign has been really taken off. There's a lot of stuff going on there. They've got some stuff going on with the Undercity of Pelsaros and all this stuff. So you'll definitely want to check that out. And then on Saturday, as my hat is screwed up, and then on Saturday, we will be finishing up Sorcery, the second Kare City Port of Traps game book of the Sorcery series by Inkle, which has been really awesome, based on Steve Jackson's classic game book series. And then we'll be moving on to Deus Ex Human Revolution. So if you want to see some, if you're feeling in the mood for some dystopic, post-apocalyptic type of stuff, you'll want to check that out. So other than that, though, please spread the word about this. Make sure to check out the website, arvanelleron.com, and please make sure as well to check out the various things in the channel. I do want to highlight again that Jelinek thing. Again, Jelinek is my new graphic novel, the sequel to Icarus, and we're going to be redoing the art for Icarus as well. Athos Arts will be publishing this, and they'll be running a Kickstarter to support that publication starting on Tuesday, June 11th. So next Tuesday at 12 p.m., 12 noon. This is a big deal for me, folks, and it's a big deal for the channel as well, because it gets us more exposure and attention, and it is a big deal as well for the folks at Athos and for the amazing artist Acela Fabio. Satolbo, of course, who is here, is also the one doing lettering and layout, and I actually just got some really cool emails from him about conversations he had today. I think he's pretty excited. I am excited to have him. The whole team that we have assembled, including Trendane, who I think is still here, Trend, who is doing, who did audio stuff, obviously, for the trailer, and is, doing stuff for a possible later audio involvement that's happening too, that I can't talk more about, but maybe, and did the original Icarus audio drama, plus Matt Van Roon doing the music for that. Just a really, really amazing team that we've assembled, and I'm very lucky again that I'm having a chance to work with these folks, but the only way it happens is if we get you folks behind it. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to do that, and please spread the word. I'm really proud of the story, and the art is just so good that it feels like it's just given flight to the words that I tried to put on the page. And for all of the work that I tried to do on world building and on character and all the stuff that Kat was talking about today with her class, when it's a graphic novel, of course, it relies on whether the art can really kind of bring it home, and Acela has done amazing work, so that's going to be great as well. Yes, and Trendane also does the intro speech for the Esper Genesis video. That is 100% correct, yes. So, but that is going to do it for me. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. You're all lovely, wonderful people. Please spread the word about the show, and please spread the word about these classes. And remember that you'll be able to participate as part of this if you were a sub or a Patreon supporter starting next month. So please make sure that you get in to do that, because I'm basically going to be putting the channel, only time I will ever do this, I'll be putting the channel into sub-only mode, so that subs can actually, everyone can watch it, but subs will be the one who will actually be able to ask questions and things like that, so that we can really kind of monetize it a little bit, because I want to be able to pay Kat for what she does, and this will be one way to sort of encourage people to be able to do that. So think of this as the second out of 2 trial classes that we did this for. I want to thank everyone for being here. Remind you all, follow the channel, please, if you haven't done so already. Check out the YouTube with !ArvTube, the Discord with !ArvCord. Please check out the Twitter with !ArvTweets. I had a couple more people follow me today while I was tweeting. Arvanelaron.com is my website for all of this, where you can get details about the calendar and also my Curse of Strahd audio podcast and things like that. !Arvtreon is my Patreon, sitting right there at $333.96. If you want to be one of the people asking questions next month, get in on that, because there's a lot of cool stuff you can get for you and also for us collectively in the channel. The shop is !Arvshop. You can get merchandise, and we're going to get more of it soon. Merchandise that will include Adventures of Middle-earth and eventually Esper Genesis, not just the Infinity and Beyond stuff, although that is there as well. So I'm excited about that. And last but certainly not least, that sub button, which several of you did today, subbed for the first time or resubbed. So thank you all so much for being a part of this as well. Thank you as well to my wonderful mods. Thank you to Aradinel and Satobo. Again, always a pleasure. Good to see you, Sat. Thank you as well to my subscribers. Thank you to Aradinel, to Nonstop, to Aranth. Always appreciated. Thank you as well to my viewers. Thank you to Angelo Flight. I don't think I've seen you in here before, Angelo. I hope you like what you saw and heard and will follow and support the channel. Thank you to Cash Bear. Thank you, of course, to Cat Rambo for the wonderful work today. Cat, again, wonderful pleasure. Great honor to have you on the channel. Thank you for the class. Thank you to Commander Root. Thank you to C. Waltrip. Thank you to Cyborg Sellout. Thank you to Psychomotion, to ECAG, to Phoenix Flotion. Thank you to Fury Fire. Thank you to Game Master's Vault. Thank you to Gorgar. Thank you to Jagtress, Moobot, I guess. Thank you to Mr. Mano. Thank you to Quapmo. Thank you to Schlitch. Thank you to Strider. Thank you to Trendane, as always. Thank you, my friend. Thank you to V&K, and thank you to Virgo Praz. Thank you all, one and all, and thank you so much to everyone who asked such great questions as well. And again, there's more where this came from, not just on during these classes, but during the channel in general, where we talk about story and narrative quite a bit. Otherwise, I will be back to you folks tomorrow when we will have Esper Genesis going on. And we are going to do a raid. I'm going to take a look, and I think I know who we're going to do a raid for. So I'm going to do our little outro here, and as soon as that is done, I will auto-magically transfer you over to someone else that will be doing the raid for. So please stick around until that happens, and I will see you folks Friday, tomorrow evening, for the furtherance of the Esper Genesis campaign, sponsored by Alligator Alley Entertainment. Until then, thanks again to Cat Rambo and the Rambo Academy for Wayward Writers, and thanks to all of you. Love you all, and I'll see all of you wonderful people tomorrow. Until then, be good to each other. Have a good night.
Fresh and new, when it all seemed clear to you, when your aim was straight and true. Were your mind untroubled by the questions in the dark, content to play your part, open pathways to your heart? Were your life untainted by a host of broken dreams, when all your acts were queens, understood all that it means? Could you have understood the way your life was bound? Did you ever wonder how you got from there to now? Oh yes, you're gonna fly away from here, where the sky grows more clear, and your problems disappear, drift away down below. Watch them go down to your friends, where the trouble never ends, and there's always just one more day left to go. try to take a